Hi everyone, welcome dear friends, welcome Yuri Castro to another episode of Psychology and Spirituality where we explore today the deep meaning point, right, Yuri, between Spiritist psychology, Spiritist philosophy, Spiritist psychology, science, and all in between when we discuss many different topics. Just as a reference, last episode we discussed why we chose our families, right? So we chose them and how family bonds served as a school for emotional growth and more awakening. And in doing so, they invite us to reflect on how love heals conflicts, especially those inherited conflicts. But Yuri, how you doing today? It's so good to have you back to our podcast, and just wanted to see how's everything on your end.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are. Yes, thank you so much. Everything is great here, Marcia. How about you?
That's good. Very good indeed. But anyways, Yuri, the plan today is for us to take that reflection that perhaps started last episode, but to go a little bit further. And we do this by uh, doing a deeper dive into our role, not as teachers, but as teachers of love. And it's very interesting because Joanna de Ângelis has through her work, invited us to understand that the peace of the world begins in how we educate, how we love, and how we shape our children's souls. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I can always almost listen to a song with those words. But anyways, I thought before we begin, I could just have an opening reflection to all of us um, in terms of if every act of violence, and this comes from Joanna de Ângelis, by the way, but if every act of violence is born from an uneducated emotion, then peace must be born from an educated heart, right? So the question for us is what kind of education are each one of us offering, right? And it doesn't have
Yes.
to be our children. It can be our friends, our family members, our whomever. But what kind of education we're offering? Are we only focusing, and this is big for Western civilization or Western society today, right? Are we only training our intellect, or are we educating to shape our soul? Right? So
Yep.
now that we reflected on this, no answer here needed, but I wanted to say, Yuri, that Joanna also tells us that the peace of the world depends on the education of children, right? So she does this very explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
Peace, education, and of course of children. And I find this to be quite a profound statement because, again, she's not referring to formal education. Did you go to MIT, Harvard, an
Yes.
Ivy League school, right? She's really talking about something that somehow we take it for granted, which is that emotional, ethical, and spiritual education, and all of them begin at home. What can you talk about this when Joanna says that the home is this sublime school of human dignity?
It's an excellent reflection, Marcia, because as we talked before in a previous episode, how family is the first school, and what do we do at school? We learn things.
Yeah.
So it's the first place that we're going to be learning, and it's dare say the most important place of all, as the works from Joanna de Angelis are gonna tell us how, like you said, the sublime school of human dignity. So that's the place where we will as parents help shape childhood, like children, like
Yeah.
little human beings.
Yeah.
And as children, we were shaped as well. So it is
Yeah.
the first school because that's the first place we're learning, and it's also this sublime school of human dignity because that's where we learn moral development. That's where we learn. You mentioned, ethical and like things that will carry throughout our lives, that will echo throughout adulthood. The
Mm-hmm.
childhood is the base, is
Mm-hmm.
the most important point in development of the human being because that's where everything kind of like develops, and we see the echoes of those developments later on
Yeah.
in adulthood when people that unfortunately have had traumatic childhood, or people who have had a lot of issues growing up or were brought up with the wrong set of morals, let's call it,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
gonna see that reflected when they become adults, how they behave
Yeah.
as individuals and how they behave in society. And that connects directly with peace.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, right, I'm thinking you have very young children, so I could say, but I have a 1 year old. How can I teach? And in my thought process here, if you even um, dumb it down, if you will, right? Parents, all of us, we teach even through our daily attitude, right? Are we grumpy all the time? Are we over dramatic? Do we overreact? But at that young age, the age of your children, even the tone of voice, right? And how conflicts are handled by me. So I think from that perspective, Yuri, I'd love to hear your thoughts. This, how I am, is imprinted in how they become my children. So we are now asked, we're called upon becoming our children's first model of ethics and love, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I have to say this is a personal note that I'm not proud, not a proud moment at all. But when my child, who's now an adult, right, was maybe 4, and of course my native tongue, my native language is Portuguese. I was living in this country for a very short period of time, and whenever I was, and I did not realize I was doing this, but whenever I was really angry, I would just start pacing and utter words in not so good or nice words in Portuguese. And I just go, oh, oh, oh. So my daughter's teacher came to me one day and she said, can you tell me? And she uttered those words phonetically speaking. What does it mean? Because your daughter just keeps doing and that's when it just it floored me. Oh my goodness, right? I am so
Yes,
happy that happened so I could be very present and look at myself in those moments when you lose, you lose your ability to manage in a better way conflicts or whatever day-to-day issues.
but thank you for sharing that, Marcia. I'll share one as well, because after all, we are
Yeah,
still learning, we're still growing,
yeah,
we're still imperfect, from the spiritual standpoint. So, and I'll preface by saying what I learned in my doctorate degree with a professor from child psychology. He said that more is caught than taught. So with children,
yes,
meaning they caught in the past tense, right? So they catch
yeah,
more from observing you than from what you're actually telling them. So if you're
yeah,
preaching something over and over and over, but you're doing the opposite, or you're doing something that it's completely different than what you're preaching, rest assured your child will do whatever it is that you're doing, because as you said perfectly well, those could be parents, grandparents, whoever, those who take the role of the care, the caretakers, the caregivers, those who raise the children, those are the role models. And by role model means they will look up to you. They will try to, like you said, imitate you when you're doing like the huffing and puffing and saying not such elevated words in Portuguese. Your 4-year-old
Yeah,
picked up on that, and
yeah,
I had a similar situation I'll share as well, because again, we are imperfect, so let's please remember that.
yes,
But
please.
when I get very, very, very upset to the point, like very, very upset, I usually punch the table. So like I do a
Yeah,
fist and I
yeah,
punch the table.
yeah, yeah,
And one day I saw my son, my 2-year-old son, doing that. And
yeah,
I'm like, wow, he barely see me do he has seen me do that, but even at such an early age,
yeah,
he made a fist and he punched the tip exactly like me, and my wife just looked at me and I said, yeah,
yeah,
that one is on me. It's for me
yeah,
to be more vigilant, but more is
yeah,
caught than taught. Doesn't matter if I tell him you can't punch the table when you're upset. If he sees me doing it, he
yeah.
will do it.
It's over. It's over, right? Your words have no meaning anymore, right?
They do
And
have no meaning. So we are, like I said, I want to say it again, more is caught than taught. So for those parents out there, for those who are raising, especially the younger ones, always
yeah,
remember that. Doesn't matter if you're trying to preach something 90% of the time. If you do 10% the opposite, they will catch on that. They
yeah,
will definitely pay attention because
yeah,
children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. And I think that's
yeah,
another very interesting tidbit, perhaps, or asterisk to make in this conversation when we're saying, the home as being, the family being the sublime
yeah,
school of human dignity, where peace begins, and all those things, because whatever it is that we're doing, they are going to pick up on that, even if they're little,
yeah,
because that's a mistake a lot of parents make, where
yeah,
they think that because they're children, like my two sons, one is 6, the other is 2, if the fact that they cannot fully express themselves
yeah,
doesn't mean that they're not paying attention to what I'm saying, what I'm doing, to what my wife is saying, or what she's doing. Even if they can't necessarily imitate the words, they are paying attention to how you behave, the tone of
yeah.
voice, like you said, the intention, and all those things. So that's like a little like warning, I guess, for
For
all
all
the
of us, a
parents
big
out there,
alert, red flag, please don't do it. And in fact, in social learning theory, we find that let's say if I, as the parent, am patient, I'm honest, I am cooperative, my child will
Mhm.
internalize that as a value, right? And no longer as you need to be patient as a command, but as an emotional truth. And I think this is quite important for all of us to think about it. And maybe we can also pivot to something that the Spirit's book tells us, that childhood is this period of innocence, right? And what
Yeah.
that book is referencing is that the spirit is still malleable, it is still
Hmm.
receptive to moral guidance. So it's an incredible opportunity for re education, a second chance, if you will, for
Yeah.
the spirit.
Absolutely, and it's interesting again because you're bringing the spiritist perspective. So if we think
Hmm.
about that, a child
Hmm.
is a child only in body because the spirit is an immortal spirit that has lived other lives, that has
Yeah,
accrued other experiences,
yeah,
defects, flaws, but also skills and maybe some virtues. So we have to remember that. But the thing which is so interesting is that there's this malleability. They're more pliable when they are
yeah,
young. Therefore, it is a double responsibility because you are now, as in the viewpoint of the parents or the
yeah,
whoever is raising the child,
yeah,
you are now the role model for that human being that is very much pliable, thankfully, to
yeah,
moral development, because that's uh, the biggest challenge is the moral development. Intellectually, they might grow just because their brains are growing, but morals, it doesn't come so naturally as them learning to talk or them learning to walk, which are normal processes that neurodevelopmentally the brain already achieves.
mm,
You don't need guidance to the point where moral development, that's the one where you
yeah,
need to be the role model. You need to be able to live what you're preaching.
yeah, yeah. So one maybe a reflection point for all of us is that how we as adults may be teaching or reteaching or reliving our own childhood lessons
Uh-huh.
when we are interacting with our children, and that may be very unconscious, right? Where we have been imprinted, and okay, I'm now a mother, and all of a sudden, I'm doing the same, the good, the bad, and the ugly that I learned. But we can stop that, right? We have our ability to say no. For example, I was spoiled, Yuri. In a day and age that my cousins all got spanked. That's a different generation. They were spanked, yelled at, etc. This girl here never got spanked and never, ever, ever got yelled at. Can you imagine that? That the beautiful, nurturing environment from a mother and a father that are so aware of what to do, right?
That is it. That is
So,
very good for you. That's very nice
yeah,
because it's
yeah.
not the majority, especially like you said with the
Hmm.
with your generation. You know, like
Yes,
and it's
yeah,
definitely something that is not so common. It's in fact is actually uncommon, but it is interesting as well because you said we relive these
yes,
experiences,
yeah,
and a lot of the times we don't realize we're reliving. But whenever we say,
yeah,
"Oh, that's how my parents used to do," or "I never complained when I had to do that," or "I never,"
yeah,
like whenever we're almost like referencing something
yeah,
that our parents did to
yeah,
us, or we are already reliving that. And a lot of the
yeah,
times that there is a trap in that as well that I see in my profession as a child psychologist,
yeah.
where parents come in and say, "Oh, but I survived this," or "I was able, I turned out
Oh,
fine." That's the
yes, I
biggest
heard that
thing that I
before.
heard.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
turned out fine. So to justify a lot
yeah,
of wrong behaviors or behaviors
yeah.
that now we know they're not really ideal. Oh, but I turned out okay. You know, to that you have to be like, okay, really, maybe, but even then, doesn't justify.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But maybe if we can now, change a little bit our conversation, because if we go back to Joanna de Ângelis, she emphasizes that every child brings this heavy load, right? You mentioned before, a child is only a child in body, right? There is a spirit that may be
Yeah,
older than us. So from that perspective, Joanna de Ângelis is very uh, she says this quite well, right? This is this child. So I can you imagine your 2 year old, and he too has this heavy. And I put my hands here because I see like almost like a Hercules with the boulder, right? It's just like this heavy load of experiences from past lives, right? They also bring, just because from an evolutionary perspective, you are today the best version of yourself, right? Yesterday, in another incarnation, for example, you were not so mature as you are today, even though today you're not that good, but you're better today than you were yesterday. But so we can think in terms of that young child that came to your life as your child or whatever, you as a caretaker, that child has that heavy load, but it also brings from those experiences some nature that can be, I don't know, either capricious or generous or fearful or assertive. And those are demonstrated to you, and you even say, how come, right?
yeah,
But they're really traces of a spiritual history that it comes with them. I have to tell my daughter, right? She was the oldest, and she was 2 years old, 2 years old, and she was already as assertive as you can imagine. Just she had that big voice, and and as we're talking about this, I'm thinking of her as a child and how it was very clear to me that that was not me, it was her, right? But our task, Yuri, as parents, educators, caregivers, etc., is very delicate because we perhaps should not have the right to suppress whatever you see instinctively coming out of the child, negative or positive, not suppress, but really guide them toward a sense of balance, So, question to you: how can we recognize and guide these innate tendencies without repressing a child? And I'm talking specifically the authentic child.
It is a great question, Marcia, because I think a lot of the times parents, and we'll say parents from now, but of course it could be
Yeah.
grandparents, uncles,
Hmm.
aunts, or whoever is raising the child. But let's say for the sake
A
of
nanny, right? A
to-
nanny,
a nanny,
or yeah, yeah,
whoever is
yeah,
raising that child.
yeah.
But let's say parents.
Hmm.
A lot of the times parents, they, like you said, use the word suppress, or they try to they try to limit the child because they see something that they don't like, without realizing that maybe that's on them, that they don't like that. Maybe there's a problem with them, not
Yeah.
with the personality, quote unquote personality, I'm doing like air quotes here,
Hmm.
of the child, or whatever it is that they are expressing, or how they're behaving.
Hmm.
The idea to guide the children is the same thing as if let's say you write a scientific paper and you want me to review it. I'm not going to write it as if it was me. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to respect your style, and here's
Hmm.
some feedback. It's almost like that. You have to understand that they're coming with their own uniqueness. They're coming with their own baggage of good things as well,
Yeah,
because the law
yeah,
of progress is unstoppable, like you already
yeah,
mentioned. So
yeah,
they're coming with good things, and a lot of the challenges they come, we will be doing a disservice if we try to limit them to the point just to like release our anxiety. So limit them to the point to relieve my anxiety, where they're not growing as they're supposed to grow, or they're
yeah,
not
yeah,
developing those talents and skills that they're supposed to develop.
yeah. And in a note, right, from a spiritist perspective, we are, each one of us, we are exactly where we should be,
Yes.
right? With the parents that are supposed to be our parents within this um, environment, the context, and the context may be your socioeconomic status, it may be the gender, the nationality, the creed, the educational environment that you're in. We choose, and we are given the best, really curated to get to where we need to be emotionally. And so this discussion is quite important if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it. If my biggest mission in the world, this today, is to be a caregiver to a child, let's not rush through it. Let's just be very intentional. And I'm thinking back to the question, I would say, right, if I were to answer the question myself, Yuri, I would say that it's remove suppression of a, say, negative tendency. But I think a parent should really be firm but loving at the same time, right? So
Yes.
you love with discipline and firmness is what will educate by perhaps setting boundaries and limits, and at the same time not hurting, emotionally speaking, that
Yeah.
child.
The setting limits is a good one, because that is
Mm,
something that a lot of people struggle with. First,
mm,
understanding, and number two, actually like putting the boundaries and the limits that
mm,
children do need. Children do need
mhm,
limits. They need, like teenagers as well, boundaries, and understand that. And there is something that is happening,
mhm.
especially more nowadays, more than ever, I would say, like at least what research is suggesting, about the anxiety from the parents interfering with how the children can actually fail. And we talked
Mm.
about this in previous episodes about the
Yeah.
helicopter parent, or I said like the snowplower
Yes.
parent, and
Yeah.
that style of parenting, and how that prevents them from learning themselves to fail, to fall, and to get up on their own. And so the limits, even the limits when we think about what they're able to do, I have to think, am I limiting my son to the
Yeah.
point where I'm making him live in a bubble, and then he
Yeah.
becomes an adult that doesn't know how to handle difficulty, that doesn't know how to handle boredom, the
Yeah.
biggest one nowadays, one of the biggest
Yeah.
ones, that doesn't know how to manage his emotions, as to not become, let's say, violent or frustrated, or develop all these mental health conditions that we see developing nowadays.
Yeah.
What is my role in that, as a parent? So that's something that I always encourage parents, to think to themselves, like, how am I putting the limits and setting the boundaries, and how is that helping them,
Hmm.
my children,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's all about consistency as well, right? So be a loving parent all the time, but with love there will be moments of conflict, and those are important because that's when they know, right? They know how to manage their own emotional response when they go through that, including boredom, including frustration, including failure. Those are big, big lessons, don't you think, Yuri?
They are big, big lessons, yeah. And then what happens is this what it's called safetyism, where there's
Mhm.
this idea of making everything so safe and so infallible that the children, they don't learn to make mistakes. They don't learn
Mhm.
on their own. And what happens, if we're talking about the episode teaching love, that's the main episode today that we're talking here. We
Yeah,
think of, let's say, Jesus. Like, every time I think of love, I think of Jesus. He
yeah,
embraced everybody, but he was able to put some limits, like for the apostles, and tell them
yeah,
this is how you should do it, right? He
yeah,
didn't condone everything, but he
yeah,
embraced everybody with love, and that is a role model. That is a guide. That's why he's the way, the truth, and the light. So
yeah,
that's why I always think of that as parents. How am I being a model of love? How am I being
yeah,
a model of
yeah.
of a peacemaker, of somebody who actually can spread love, can accept love, can give love?
I love it. I love it. Um, one thing that is maybe important for us to bring it up here is the fact that Joanna even cautious about it is the fact that the hypocrisy of hiding, right? And I think you already mentioned about it, where you as an adult commend, right? I commend this type of obedience, but I don't role model the same, and the end result of this discrepancy in behavior is dishonesty, right? It is
Yeah,
hypocrisy. And so I think when we talk about being the model of love and peace, it's really also a question of encouraging authentic behavior, right? Which means how can I let my child express emotions in a healthy manner, right? Instead of, oh my goodness, my father is here and there is no room to be bored.
yeah.
So this is
Or to be
the yin and
sad.
yang, right?
Hmm.
The paradox of this whole discussion. We need to allow a safety environment to to explore with my emotional responses, but as you said, don't fall into the um, the safetyism where I want you to be safe, so I don't want you to go through any sort of pain. We're talking about two different things, right?
Yeah, and authenticity is so important because,
Mm,
again, just to say it again, we're all unique individuals. We're
yeah,
all
yeah.
unique. God does not do copies. So we're all unique.
Snowflakes, snowflakes, yeah.
We are very unique. So understanding that, even though you want your child to conform, or you want your child to be exactly as you are, that's
Yeah,
not the case. You got to
yeah,
embrace whatever challenges that they have, whatever virtues they bring,
yeah,
understanding that this specific spirit reincarnated
yeah.
with you for a reason.
Yes, yes.
They nothing happens by accident. Otherwise, God would be unfair, and God is
Yeah, yeah.
perfect in all His qualities, all love, and all of that. So
No waste,
they
right? No waste. It's very
nothing, no,
precise. Yeah, yeah,
very precise. So therefore, if that child is there, how am I behaving? How am I showing love? How am I showing acceptance? Because if I'm somebody that doesn't accept my child is gonna grow up to be somebody that doesn't accept others as well. And
yeah,
that's when we're talking about peace.
yeah,
Peace.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's the main thing. It's not about not having conflict. It's about the violence
Yeah.
when people don't like me or don't agree with me or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's when we don't have peace.
Yeah. That's a very good point. There's something else that I wanted to bring before I move on to the what you're talking about, which is educating for peace specifically. But in the Gospel according to Spiritism, I think it was chapter 14, Kardec really talks about family as this divine institution, but as a just as a reminder, right? Parents are not owners. This is big. Parents
Yes.
do not own their children. They're guardians of the souls that they were entrusted to them. So it's a tremendous responsibility, right? It is some we need to be very careful with
Yes.
that young child that is entrusted to us.
Yeah, they are our children in this life and temporary. Like they are in the
Mm-hmm.
state of being my sons,
Yeah,
but the spirits they don't belong to me. The spirits
yeah,
belong to God, to the Creator.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's understanding that is very important, so we don't
yeah.
become overly possessive or overly protective or any type of imbalance. And as we know,
Uh-huh.
imbalance is harmony is the goal. Balance is the goal. So if any, is there anything overly something, it's probably
Yeah.
not good. So
Do you have any advice perhaps for how can we're talking about modern family with all of our problems, snowplow parents, helicopter parents, whatever you are, or even negligent parents. I think that's the other spectrum. But how can modern families encourage emotional authenticity without chaos, right? So how do we just in your thoughts, your opinions, but how can families today cultivate the both sides which is the authentic and freedom to express themselves, and on the other hand the discipline and boundaries, etc. Do you have any thoughts on that?
be the change you wish to see in the world, Gandhi. That's it.
Ah,
You're the role.
Gandhi,
You
yeah,
are the role model to your children. So if I want to foster an environment where they are able to emotionally to regulate their own emotions and understand
yeah,
what they're feeling and be able to express that, they will see that from myself. So in the days if I'm
yeah,
not feeling so good, they ask me. I'm not gonna pretend, oh no, I'm doing great, because they'll know that smile is
that's
fake. They
right.
will know that something is wrong with daddy. They will know that daddy had a, let's say, a difficult day at work, but he's lying. The same. So it's being able to express yourself, being able
Mhm.
to say, hey, I didn't like this, or no, I'm not very happy right now, and
Mhm.
being true to yourself, because your children will see it, and they'll say, okay, so it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to
Mhm.
feel anxious, it's okay to feel very happy, it's okay to feel frustrated. It's even
Mhm.
if they don't verbalize that, they
Yeah,
will learn it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, want us to maybe close our time together, discussing the idea of educating for peace, and quite frankly, I would say this is the biggest revolution there
Yeah.
is, morally speaking, right? So Joanna says the following, Yuri: to build on a child, a new being, is to work for peace in society. The wars are not made by weapons, but by the people who build them. Really crazy,
Yeah.
right? So she's really bringing that notion that the root of war and violence should not seen by us as political but emotional, because the people that are behind the wars, right, and even to build the weapons, if they are emotionally mature they wouldn't. So if children grow up, say, this is just fictitious here, but if children grow up surrounded by competitiveness or neglect or even this state of constant moral confusion, there will be adults, and you mentioned this before, like that. So, how can we educate for peace, Yuri? What what families, what should they be thinking in terms of what can they do
Hmm.
to live in that this paradigm? I'm here educating for peace.
Yeah, one, I'd say within their own family, their own like families. Let's say,
Mm,
I'll give my example: myself, my wife, my two sons. So how am I behaving? How am I teaching them? How am I educating my
mm,
children?
mm,
Same thing with the partner. Same thing with my wife, because we have to
mm.
be aligned as far
Yes.
as educating the children and what we're showing them, what limits we're imposing, what limits we're not imposing, how we're fostering them to be authentic, how are we educating them for peace, but also outside. Because
Hmm.
outside they will find, like I said, others who don't agree with them, others who
Yeah.
mistreat them, others who hurt them, emotionally, verbally, physically. How will they handle that will depend a lot on how they see us adults handling it, how they
Hmm.
see me, let's say, driving in traffic here in Miami, which is awful. How am I no, really, how am I
Yeah.
behaving here in traffic? And I say, oh, you can't curse, but I'm cursing, and I'm honking, and I'm,
Yeah.
road raging. How am I
Yes.
behaving out there? Because the society, like peace, starts in the home, but is something that it goes beyond the home. And same thing with
Yeah.
violence. If I'm
Yeah.
only showing violence here, they're gonna show violence out there, and that's how this let's say the phenomena will grow. Because even nowadays in the world that has still so much violence, and like you said, the
Yeah.
weapons, like
Yeah.
Joanna said so well, that like it's not the
Yeah.
weapon, it's like the people who are building, the people who are using them.
Yeah.
Because there's still the violent tendency, because it all started in childhood too,
Yeah.
you know
And I'm thinking we can also be aware that yes, traffic is a great example, especially traffic in Miami. But right, but what about the violence that I show toward myself?
Oh, as well.
Right?
Absolutely. How
Yeah,
am I handling my own failures? How am I handling my own self? Am I telling
yeah,
them you
yeah,
can't hurt yourself, but they're seeing me scream at the mirror and
yeah.
call myself names?
Yes,
So
yeah,
there
yeah,
are all
yeah,
these things, and traffic is one that I like to mention because it sounds so innocuous. It sounds
yeah,
so like inconsequential in a way, like, oh, it's just everybody gets stressed out. Yeah, but how am my two sons in the back? How are they
yeah,
observing me as I deal with the frustrations and the disrespect of other drivers and things like that? They are
uh,
observing that. They are
yeah,
learning that. So how am I behaving outside of the home?
yeah,
Am I being peaceful?
yeah,
Or am I disseminating anger and
yeah,
violence?
yeah. My father, six children, so he was hyper alert with um, being that model, and he very safe, very. He was always making sure nothing goes and harm the children. But anyways, he drove. So conservatively, Yuri, so conservatively, and everybody says, "Oh my gosh, you drive so slow and just soft, right?" And often we were there in the car with him, and there'd be a car. This is Brazil, so you know how it is. So they just go and all those noises and go through them and blah blah blah, and he's still driving, and all of a sudden, right, same car that did all of this is stuck at parallel in front of the same red light. So he would take this to look at us children in the back seat, and he would say, "See, no, I have no my heart, my heart is doing okay, my blood pressure is okay, I did not waste gas, my tires are better, and my car will be longer, will be in better maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still here. This person accomplished nothing. And I
Yeah.
think this is so interesting because I was quite young, right, going to school, and he would pick us up, and this is something that happened over and over and over again. So if you ask me, how do I drive? Just like my dad, I am impossibly
Hmm.
slow and over conservative. I don't need to be like that. It's just, you know, why
But
not?
it's how, but it's what
Yeah.
it's how you learned. It's how you
Yes.
learn.
Yes.
I
Yes.
drive fast, but very um, not too much over the limits, of course, but like try to be safe, not to like do anything dangerous,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But with as far as going back to the idea of the of peace and how to
Mm.
educate for peace in this,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age where
Yeah.
everybody people seem to be way more impatient, way more irritable, way more prone
Yeah. Yeah.
to abuse online, to do
Yeah.
everything that perhaps 20, 30, 40 years ago weren't here because of the advances of technology. So educating for peace, I think it seeps in all these different areas that
Yeah.
we must be aware of. So it's not
Yeah.
only oh, my children never seen me punch another man. Yeah, but have they seen me berate another man? Have they seen me
Yeah.
be disrespectful to elderly, to other people?
All
You
the
know what I'm saying?
gradation
So
of that violence. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, all of the different pieces. So it's being
Yeah.
very mindful of
And
that.
and I think we can start small. Tell me what you think, right? I can start with, okay, I'm young, I'm a young mother, and I don't know much about psychology. Just kidding here. But I'm going to educate for peace. And we can start that by teaching emotional literacy, right? Because this is something that we even find in some cases where children cannot really identify or name or manage their emotions in a constructive way. So, how can we promote empathy, cooperation, if I don't know what I
Yeah.
feel, right?
And that is something we see in adults too, Marcia, because
Mm,
what happens with those children grow up. They grow up and
mm,
we see them in the office where these are adults, full grown adults who don't know when they're feeling hungry or when they're feeling bored or when they're feeling sad and when they're feeling anxious. They cannot even separate. So what happens is they take the
mm.
wrong actions to fulfill certain needs that they think they have, but
Yeah,
they end up even feeling emptier. So
yeah,
it is so important to teach children the emotional knowledge and emotional regulation, emotional knowledge. What is it that you're feeling? It's okay to feel sad when this happens. It's okay to feel anxious when that happens. It's normalizing a lot of that because children
mm,
are not robots. They're also human beings. They're also like us. They feel things too. So
yeah,
understanding that is very important. So not only modeling appropriate behavior, which is what we
yeah.
talked about. Also, if I can give a little like psychological tips, I guess for parents would
Please
be
do. Yeah.
there's something called we usually say predictability and consistency. So
Hmm.
if you're teaching behavior, give feedback. Always give feedback, both positive and negative, because that's something parents
Yeah.
most parents do wrong. If I have to say, is they only correct what's wrong, but they never praise when is right. So you have to do both things
Hmm.
and be very predictable, have the very predictable outcome from a behavior you desire, and be consistent with the reward or the punishment. Not to be
Yeah.
too behavioral here, but
Yeah.
understanding how your children as they grow, they need to understand the code of conduct of the family. They need to understand these things that are accepted, things that are not accepted. They must have a place to be authentic. But
Yeah.
predictability and consistency is one that we often see parents failing to maintain in the home, where the children never knows what they're going to get. If they try to hug their parents, they don't know what they're going to get. If they
Yeah.
break a
Terrible.
vase because they're playing
Yeah.
soccer inside the house, they don't know what's going to happen. Am I going
Yeah.
to be punished in what way? And they don't know. Children
I
need to
broke a
have that.
vase. I broke a vase playing soccer in my mother's living room.
Gosh,
Oh my goodness.
I did so many bad things I don't even want to say as a child growing up. But thankfully, thankfully I had
Yeah.
loving parents and turned out
I,
okay. I did turn out okay.
we did turn out okay, we think, right?
Yes.
But Joanna de Ângelis, she's her books are always bringing Jesus, right? So she
Yeah.
she she links the idea of this foundational aspect of teaching peace through love, and she links to his words, right? Let the children, the little children, come to me, and
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to remember that because Jesus recognized that divine potential within each child. And we see in some cases this symbol of purity, of openness, of trust, right? That malleability of their beginning of their lives. And when we educate through love, we are really becoming critical instruments in helping that divine potential unfold, right? So it's just so important.
Absolutely. Also, like the humility piece as well. I think it's a big one that Jesus also exemplified. And we have
Hmm.
that in children when they come and they say, "Hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you teach me?" Or, "Hey, I want to learn that." Like having
Yeah,
that
yeah,
humility and that curiosity that a lot of the times as adults we don't because oh, I don't want to
yeah,
appear incompetent here.
yeah,
I'm gonna pretend that I know, and
yeah.
then it's
I,
quite the opposite, you know.
yeah, I would say this is my practical examples for everyone, right? Let's encourage our children, collectively speaking, to practice forgiveness, also practice gratitude at home. I would also make sure that when we have a certain decision that may be not as popular, right? For example, oh, we're going to go to Orlando and we're going to go to Disney, right? No, it may be that we're not going to Orlando to Disney this year for whatever reason, but sharing those family decisions, good and bad, but listen, encourage their feelings when they get to the news, and finally, really, and this comes from my own experience, right? To replace the idea of a physical punishment that in my generation was, especially with my cousins, right? We are very large family, Yuri, but they all talked about how terrible their parents were, and but my parents, they replaced punishment with dialogue, but also accountability. So when we start to see those things, we can see that society can change, right? When every every child learns from home that, as you said before, that peace begins with self-regulation, right? With empathy,
Absolutely.
with respect.
And not repeating cycles of pain. That's something we also talk about, you know, not repeating
Hmm.
these cycles that perhaps were not so helpful as you grew up, and then you
Hmm.
take that and you say, okay, I'm not gonna do that, and you improve a little bit, and your children, by by as a result, they will improve as well. So that's how we build a peaceful society.
Yeah,
Each person doing their own part, and us as parents doing our part as parents
yeah,
to educate for peace and with
yeah,
forgiveness and with, like you said, gratitude, and encouraging them to speak up. When you said that, that's very important. Encouraging them to speak up, but at the same time, helping them understand that, hey, we're going to disagree. There's
yeah,
going to be conflict, that we're going to disagree. We're different people.
yeah,
For, like in my house, four of us, right? So
yeah,
there's going to be conflict, but I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear what you have to say. I want
yeah.
to hear your frustration.
I love it. Yuri, I love this conversation, but we are at time. And as we wrap up, let's maybe recall some of Joanna's message or essential key points, right? And she says to educate with and for love is the most effective method to achieve balance in the family. So we talked about that education is not control, but it is, maybe we can think of it as a creative outlet, right? Because we can manage and create in terms of the choice of gestures, tone of voice, reactions, so that we are somehow shaping the blueprint of this human soul that has been entrusted to us. So I just think that it's so important for us to reflect upon this and our role into it. But thank you, Yuri. Thank you, everyone who's here with us. And for those who are here for the first time, please note that the Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna de Ângelis, and we appreciate you. We also appreciate our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, United States Spiritist Federation, International Spiritist Council, and AME Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the global organization called the Medical Spiritist Association. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you and see you next time.